So this morning's talks about tea and health, specifically coming from two different perspectives. One's from a Western perspective, and or from a biomedical perspective, and the other is from more of a Taoist perspective. Really, it's not just Chinese medicine; it's more from a five-element approach. And like I was saying at the beginning, I think coming from a reductionist and materialist approach, we can see the difference between these worldviews and approaches to human health. You know, when I was in school studying Chinese medicine, I was also doing a master's degree in biomedical science, and what I found so interesting was oftentimes when I walked out of my classes in biomedical science, I would find myself exhausted, kind of intellectually, just feeling like spun out, like I needed a break, and annoyed is a way to put it. Whereas when I walked out of my classes in Chinese medicine, even if they were really dense, like diagnosis or acupuncture, I always found myself invigorated, and I got curious about that over the years. And I think what I realized was the basis and root of Taoist medicine is it came out of an exploration of what are the herbs and practices and subtle energetics of the body that support and nourish optimal health, longevity, greater acuity in intelligence or improved intelligence, wisdom. How do we develop the health of the different organ systems and the energetics of the body, of our what's called Jing, Qi, and Shen? It's rooted in an idea of what is the highest potential expression of health in a human being. And so that is the underlying philosophy or ethos of the medicine. And so all the medicine that comes out of it is from that perspective. And I think that's why it's invigorating and energizing as a study. Whereas all the classes in biomedical science come out of a disease model. We're just studying what is the nature of disease and pathology, and it's not about bringing people back into health. It's how do you kill the virus, kill the bacteria, stop the fungal infection. It's rooted in a perspective where we are separate from nature, and all of these exogenous factors attack us and cause us ill health, and how do we attack them back and kill them? So it's even built into the language. So antibiotics, bios is life, or bio. So antibiotics is the negation of bios, of life, in this case of bacteria. So, and thank God we have antibiotics, right? There are circumstances where without them people die. So I think Western medicine is extraordinary in so many ways, especially in our ability to use labs and radiological imaging and things to see what's going on in a human being's body. I mean, it's extraordinary. And there are a lot of areas where I would most certainly see a Western medical doctor than a Chinese medicine doctor. But the overarching philosophy and understanding of man's relationship to the natural world, they are completely different. And in merging those two views, we have what's called an integrative or an integral perspective on human health that doesn't leave any part of the self behind and doesn't see all the different aspects of a person's makeup as separate. You know, our emotions most definitely contribute to our health, our psychological well-being, our communities, the context of our lives, the ways in which we meet our basic needs, the food we eat, etc. All of this, our spiritual growth and development, having access to the resources necessary to be able to grow and evolve as a person. All of these aspects are necessary and very intrinsic, important aspects of a person's health. So just approaching health from a biomedical or Western medical perspective is very limited. Okay, so that being said, I'm now going to jump into a lot of the biomedical and chemical constituents of what makes up tea. And so I wanted to just give some context for what is more interesting to me and what is more nourishing in terms of one's relationship to tea is definitely more from a Taoist or Chinese medicine perspective. But for the sake of love of tea, we can study it from all different angles. So I'm going to go into some of the Western side of what is actually in tea and how it affects us physiologically. And then I kind of want to conclude more with more of a 5-element approach to the health of tea. So I took some notes yesterday, and for those of you who have come to these talks, you know if I don't stick to some notes, we're going to end up God knows where. So I'm just going to refer to these kind of throughout the talk. So at a very general level, or at the most general level, I think tea is the most supportive of alleviating depression and dementia, and for how you feel, making you calmer and improving one's memory and also the quality of their attention. So this is at a very general level. And this is kind of backed up by, you could say, the science of what's in tea. So 100 milliliters, which is about 1/2 cup of tea. And for those of you who drink tea the way I do, you probably drink a lot more than 1/2 cup of tea in a day. And there are reasons why that's actually totally fine. But 1/2 cup of tea a day, we found, decreases the risk of depression and dementia, or just decreases depression in general. And this is partially and primarily because of something called catechins. So these are antioxidants. The one you'll hear a lot about if you start looking into this is called EGCG, which is epigallocatechin gallate. And so it makes up quite a bit of what's actually in the dry weight of tea, up to 42%. And L-theanine is another thing you'll hear a lot about, theanine, and that makes up about 3%. So the combination of EGCG, this antioxidant, with L-theanine, when you combine them with caffeine, they have this very interesting effect in that they make you calmer, but they also improve your memory and your attention, and they lift mood. So they lift mood because they're anxiolytic, meaning they're anti-anxiety, but they also have been shown in all these studies to alleviate depression and improve the quality of the mind, meaning the way that neurotransmitters move along axonal transports, so how the mind actually functions. So when you drink some tea and your attention rises, you feel more alert, you feel more calm, but you also feel like sharper or brighter. That's actually happening in the mind because of these compounds like theanine and EGCG. So just in terms of generally drinking tea and how it makes you feel, that's really significant. Also, the alleviation of depression. The levels of depression that we're finding in North America, especially in young people, is extraordinarily high. And I think that's partially because of our relationship to technology and how it affects our attention. This deep contemplative attention is something that we don't actively develop unless we have maybe a meditation practice or unless we're cultivating it. It's interesting, whenever I'm like drinking tea and then I'm going to give one of these talks, I always find that I don't really want to talk. I find that when you're drinking tea, it has this quality of really dropping you into a different state and of helping us to develop this calm, deep, focused attention and hearing what's going on inside of us. And that's where we get a little bit into tea as a Shen tonic. So I'm going to talk about that later in terms of kind of the Taoist or 5-element aspect of tea. So in the world, there are three principal non-alcoholic beverages that are the most prevalent, that we see consumed the most. And those are coffee, cocoa, and tea. But after water, they're the most consumed. And when you look at the study of them, and there's some, I know in one of Michael Pollan's books, and there's actually a book just called Caffeine, which I was looking for yesterday. I've got it here somewhere, but they talk all about the difference of these different stimulants and how they affect the body. And tea most definitely has the most positive health benefits. There's a lot of them, which is what we're going to jump into here. So the three kind of most significant health supporting ingredients are vitamins, amino acids, and polyphenols. And then additionally, and this is significant but not as significant as the first three, are minerals, something called lipopolysaccharides, and then there are some carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. I'll talk about that a little bit, but it's insignificant relatively. And then of course caffeine, and caffeine is a magical molecule, which we'll talk about a little bit. Okay, so in terms of vitamins, of course the vitamins that we absorb through tea are the water-soluble vitamins as opposed to fat-soluble. So the most significant concentration in tea that we have are vitamins C, B, and A. So we have a higher concentration of vitamins C and B in tea than in the equivalent weight of fruits and vegetables. So it's actually a really significant amount of these vitamins. And when you think about vitamin C, everybody thinks about immunity, and that's really because vitamin C is a potent antioxidant. So it's flushing the body of free radicals. Also, vitamin C is very important for the biosynthesis of collagen. And collagen is really essential for healthy skin, healthy hair, healthy nails, and for the mucous membranes that run through the entire body. And also for protein metabolism. So a lot of people have difficulty metabolizing and assimilating protein properly. And those amino acids that make up protein are the absolute foundation. They're the building blocks of everything in our body. And vitamin C is also really important for the biosynthesis of certain neurotransmitters, right? Which has to do with brain function and all the physiological metabolic activity that's a byproduct of healthy neurotransmitter activity. And then we have vitamin B, which is really important also for what's called the axonal transport of neurotransmitters. So again, brain function and neurotransmitter synthesis, but also getting into skin and mucous membranes. So something that I noticed, just to give kind of a practical example, when I've hung out in China and Taiwan with people who are serious cha jin or tea people, a lot of them are like in their 70s or 80s and they look like they're 40. Now granted, generally speaking, people who follow the way of tea or live a life of tea, they tend to not drink alcohol or very little. They tend to eat healthier diets. Tea often goes with meditation and Tai Chi and Qigong, which are subtle arts. And so living a clean lifestyle is also necessary to develop the sensitivity to Qi and sensitivity to the states of our mind for us to cultivate greater levels of sensitivity and greater levels of equanimity. So generally speaking, people living a tea life also live a very healthy lifestyle. So it's not surprising to me that they look vital and healthy in their 70s or 80s. But there are also a number of polyphenols and catechins, which I'm going to talk about, and antioxidants in tea that are actually anti-aging as well. So, with the vitamins B and C, their effect on skin, hair, and nails because of those vitamins is part of the reason I believe that these folks look very young. Um, tea is most definitely a longevity herb. So specifically with green tea has the highest concentration of vitamins, amino acids, and polyphenols. Um, when you ferment a tea, so our black teas, oolongs, and most definitely pu-erh tea, you find a decrease in the vitamins, amino acids, and polyphenols. Um, but fermentation increases the minerals in tea and also the microorganisms that support healthy gut growth and other metabolic factors, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later. So there are a lot of benefits to green teas and white teas and less fermented and processed teas. And then there are also a lot of health benefits to the more fermented and darker teas. So this is part of the reason that we tend to drink teas cyclically throughout the year in different seasons, because it nourishes and supports different vital systems of our physiology. So there is also vitamin A in tea, which is important, but vitamin A is fat soluble. It's not water soluble, which means you actually have to consume the substance, because when you brew the tea, you're not absorbing the vitamin A or very small amounts of it. Vitamin A is very concentrated in carotene, which we find in carrots. And actually, there's more vitamin A in the same weight of tea as there is in a carrot, but it's not being absorbed by the body, which is why, we tend to cook with tea. I put tea in rice. And also, there's a wonderful Burmese dish where you work with fermented tea and you actually consume the tea leaves. After you've brewed tea, you can take tea leaves and put them in rice. And then you're getting all this vitamin A. Or, a lot of people like to cook with matcha, right? So they make a lot of baked goods and things. So tea is wonderful to cook with, which a lot of people don't realize. So the next kind of highest concentration or health supporting ingredient, you could say, are amino acids. There are dozens of amino acids in tea, but especially the one you hear talked about the most is something called thiamine. It comprises 2 to 5% of tea, and thiamine is really important. It's essential for metabolism, and many of the amino acids they're only attainable by exogenous sources, meaning that we have to consume them from something in order to get them in the body, but they're absolutely essential to our health. In other words, the body doesn't naturally produce a lot of these amino acids. And in tea is loaded with amino acids, but the one you hear the most about is thiamine. Now, the main alkaloid in tea is caffeine. So, of course, people want to know, why does tea make you feel the way it makes you feel? Is it just the caffeine? And the answer is most definitely no. It's the combination of antioxidants, L-theanine, these amino acids, the vitamins, the minerals. It's the way that they interact with the caffeine, the way they interact with each other, and then the way that they act with with the microorganisms in the colon and the small intestines. All of these interactions create the effects that tea has on you. It's also because the different concentrations of these ingredients in different types of tea, like white tea or green tea, the way that those interact with our physiology is why different types of tea make us feel differently, right? All of you know, if you drink different types of tea, some are very calming and grounding and centering, and some are stimulating and bring you out to the surface. Some teas make you want to talk and connect, some make you want to meditate, etc. And that's because all these different ingredients affect us differently, right? So with caffeine is this alkaloid. The whole class called alkaloids in herbalism is absolutely fascinating. You can go, maybe I'll do another talk just on alkaloids sometime. But alkaloids are very important because they fortify the heart and the cardiovascular system. and they're diuretic, so we pee when we consume them. They affect the excretory organs in interesting ways. But caffeine is actually in small quantities very good for the heart. Also, alkaloids, and specifically caffeine, they excite the cerebral cortex in the mind. And the difference, though, with tea is that unlike other stimulants, it's purely physiological. So tea is non-addictive. You don't go through withdrawals if you don't drink tea. It's got this very benign and kind of gentle effect on the nervous system and on the endocrine system. So it's not like other stimulants where if you start taking the stimulant and then you stop taking it, you become physiologically dependent on it. Tea is non-addictive. It's a very mild stimulant that actually has way more health benefits than it does any kind of deleterious effect on us physiologically. So another way to say it is it's purely physiological. It's not psychologically addictive like other stimulants. There's also no side effects. There's no withdrawal. And part of the reason for that is that tea combines with other what are called polyphenols so that it's very easily discharged from the body. It leaves the body very easily. And this is part of the reason why most teas you can drink and then go to sleep at night. Whereas if I, for example, drink coffee in the morning, I still will have a hard time falling asleep at night because it doesn't combine with all these polyphenols and flush out of the body. And part of that is the diuretic effect, so you pee the tea out, but also that the polyphenols help the body get rid of it. So tea doesn't stay in the tissue and in the brain for very, very long periods of time. It kind of comes in, we enjoy the experience, and then it flushes out without the withdrawal, without the crash. So the way that the caffeine in tea works in the body, it's actually very supportive of our health, supportive of our heart and cardiovascular system, without all the negative side effects of some other caffeinated substances. Okay, are all of you falling asleep yet? Is this good stuff? Is it interesting? Also, if you have any specific questions coming up, feel free to just jump in and ask. All right, I want to jump into the other main three or four main kind of health-giving ingredients in tea, and then I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about pu-erh tea and metabolism. So let's take a little break, have a sip of tea. I told you we were going to jump into a bunch of material, so I hope this isn't just like, oh Christ, we're just talking about science straight up right now. Hopefully it's interesting. All right. So probably the biggest focus of modern research on tea has been on something called polyphenols, tea polyphenols. They're also known as catechins. Part of the reason this has been such a huge topic of research is because of its potential for anti-aging properties. There are huge benefits in polyphenols to the body. Probably the most significant, and this is one you can kind of think about when you're drinking tea, is that polyphenols help the body in multiple different ways to resist the effects of carcinogenic substances, of radiation and of aging. And there's carcinogens in all the food coloring. There's carcinogens in some of the plastics that a lot of our foods come in. We're exposed to radiation all the time. The environmental stressors on the body, I don't remember what the actual statistic is, but like 100 years ago versus today, it's in multiples of thousands, the environmental what's the term I'm looking for? I'm just going to say toxins that we're exposed to in a given day. It's kind of mind-blowing when you start. I stopped researching this because I was like, this terrifies me. Like, I'm never going to leave my house. But even in my house, it's in the pillows, and it's in the plastics, and it's in the way that we build everything. So we're exposed to huge amounts of toxic loads on the body. So substances that help the body flush all of those toxins out. And then in terms of radiation, we're exposed to crazy amounts of EMFs, especially with 5G now and all of this. We carry around these little things in our pockets that are having all these impacts on the electromagnetic fields around our bodies and on... Anyways, I'm not going to go off on this too much or else we'll just leave here very depressed. But the thing is that there are things we can do to combat or offset the influences of all these environmental factors. And this is where the polyphenols in tea, I think, are really promising, because the polyphenols help the body to find cells that are not functioning properly, as well as the free radical species that are floating through the body, and to help flush the body out, or flush them out of the body. This is also one of the primary reasons that tea is an anti-aging substance, because it's helping flush the things of the body that are causing metabolic reaction, or for all the cells in the body that are the killer T cells and the cells of the body that are attacking foreign substances and trying to keep you healthy. It helps flush all of this out, which is less work for the liver and kidneys to deal with the byproduct, the metabolic byproduct of all these cells that are dying in the body. And when the body is not working as hard to deal with all these toxins, it can then mobilize all that energy into cell regeneration and into supporting the health and general healthy function of the body. So polyphenols are really interesting because there's a high concentration of them in tea. And they're the main anti-aging factors, you could say, in tea. So the next kind of major category is minerals, right? There are more than 40 minerals in tea, 40 kinds of minerals. The one we hear talked about the most is called potassium. We've all, of course, all heard of potassium, which is really essential for healthy blood balance and what's called osmotic pressure, and also for the renewal of human cells. So not only is tea helping the body flush out dead cells and free radicals, but it's also got minerals that are helping regenerate and renew human cells. Of course, as all of you know, I think everything about tea is just magical, but this is some of the science of the magic of what's happening in tea. There's also high concentrations of manganese, selenium, zinc, and calcium. I'm not going to go into why all those are so important, but they are. The calcium, especially for bone health, selenium, skin, hair, and nails, etc. And the last kind of general category in terms of what's in tea are lipopolysaccharides. So these really help the body to manufacture healthy blood. Blood, from Chinese medicine perspective, is the mother of qi, of energy, and energy is the commander or of the blood. So qi moves the blood. Qi is what pushes it's what activates, it's the life force that allows all of the functioning of the body. But the blood is what's carrying all the nutrients through all of the organs, through the entire vascular system, supporting every metabolic function in the body. So blood is what nourishes and carries nutrients through the body. So these lipopolysaccharides in tea really help us manufacture and produce healthy blood. Healthy blood also means healthy immunity. So these polysaccharides also support strong and robust immunity. And they are one of the factors that help us resist the effects of radiation. So lipopolysaccharides are important in all sorts of different ways. I believe, I need to verify this, but I believe they're also part of what's called the phospholipid bilayer, which is a fatty layer around every single cell in the body. And having a healthy layer of fat around each cell is what allows for the healthy transport of nutrients in and out of the cells. So having a healthy cellular function is really important. Okay, I'm going to talk about a topic that some people are going to say, like, well, I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting. And the marketing version of this is weight loss, whereas I would talk about it in terms of healthy metabolic function and healthy metabolism. The reason that metabolism is so important, there's a whole school of Chinese medicine called the Earth School, and the Earth is about spleen and stomach and digestion. And if you look at the 5 elements, all the 4 elements are moving around the earth element. The earth element's the center. And part of the reason that's so important is that if you are not absorbing the nutrients, if you're not eating healthy nutrition, and then you're not absorbing the nutrients, there's no way that you can be healthy. We have to be able to absorb nutrients in order to have robust health. It's absolutely vital and essential to good health. So in a lot of ways, health begins with putting healthy stuff in the body, how we consume it, how we eat food, mindfully, with care for where it came from. And then we have to also be able to absorb it. The other side of it is not eating a bunch of processed food and junk food. So I always say, shop around the exterior of the grocery store, or better yet, the farmer's market. Avoid the whole middle section, basically. So healthy metabolism is really essential. So I'm going to use the marketing term, which is weight loss, but really it's about healthy maintenance of weight in the body, which tea contributes to in interesting ways. So we used to think for a long time that the reason tea contributed to weight loss or healthy weight maintenance was because of all the antioxidants. And so people always thought, because the antioxidants are most concentrated in green tea, that green tea was what was touted as a weight loss tea, right? And that the body didn't accumulate as much fat when consuming high amounts of antioxidants. But now we're learning that it's part of a totally different process, which is what's called enzyme inhibition combined with gut microbiota interactions. So I'm going to kind of break this down a little bit. There's something that has not been fully verified, but there are a number of studies on it, which I've read a couple of them, that's called the short chain fatty acid hypothesis. Okay, if you haven't gotten bored yet in this talk, I guarantee in the next 3 minutes I can drive you to tears. The short chain fatty acid hypothesis it's this hypothesis that the weight loss effectiveness of a tea is part of a cascade. And here's the basis of the cascade. There are certain enzymes that are inhibited when you drink tea. They're carbohydrate. Carbohydrate digestive enzyme inhibitors. Those then lead to undigested carbohydrates staying in circulation in the digestive system, which then combine with healthy gut microorganisms, right? Everybody's heard about the microbiome of the gut, which in the colon specifically, that also combine with those polyphenols that I was talking about earlier. And those all combine and they produce what are called short chain fatty acids, which then enhance lipid or fat metabolism. So all of this is to say that there are certain compounds in the tea, they inhibit certain enzymes, which then leads to carbohydrates staying in circulation, combining with gut microbiome, which then leads to enhanced fat metabolism, lipid metabolism. If you want the fancy term for it, it's called AMP, activated protein kinase activation. So if you want to go online and look up activated protein kinase activation, that's the reason that tea stimulates fat metabolism. It is an interesting topic to study, what's going on physiologically, and a lot of that has become we've been able to study it more thoroughly because we now have such a profound understanding of the gut microbiome, which is we're just at the tip of the iceberg, understanding its effect on immunity, on mood, depression, health, anxiety. The way that the gut microbiome via the vagus nerve affects brain function is fascinating. So why this has such profound ramifications is that Western medicine is starting to catch up to things that Chinese medicine has been talking about for a very long time. Like, oh wow, the gut microbiome and how much you worry and how much stress you have in the body affects all these other how you feel, and how you feel affects how your organs are functioning, so we're starting to understand the relationship between the mind, emotion, body connections, and Western medicine is just beginning to understand those relationships. And Chinese medicine is going, we've been talking about this stuff for thousands of years. Like, you guys are, you're behind the eight ball here on this. So this enhanced lipid metabolism or weight loss, we used to think it was all about green tea. Now we're learning that it's especially concentrated in fermented teas and pu-erh tea most specifically. Also black and oolong, but pu-erh especially because of pu-erh tea's influence on the gut microbiota. So that brings us to we've gotten through the first two sections. The third section of kind of what I want to talk about is about pu-erh tea and the health benefits of pu-erh tea. I was going to talk about coffee versus tea, how they affect our physiology, but I'm going to save that for another chat. At Living Tea, we're starting to shift the focus of the brand towards pu-erh tea, partially because I am very passionate about pu-erh tea, and because you can drink different types of pu-erh tea throughout different times of the year. So, which, by the way, we just loaded a new pu-erh tea to the website a couple days ago called Gateless Gate. It's an aged show pu-erh cake that is just like mind-blowing. I'm obsessed with this tea. If you're looking for a new tea. But the health benefits of pu-erh tea exceed any of the other categories. And this is one of the reasons that I'm kind of fascinated by it. So pu-erh tea comes from a large leaf varietal that's called Camellia sinensis assamica. And it grows in Yunnan. And Yunnan is the birthplace of all tea in the world. So the oldest tea trees in the world are in southwest China in Yunnan. And these old growth trees basically turn into their own mini ecosystems. They're covered in bacteria, fungi, different types of health-giving molds. There's so many different insects and animals and cobwebs, and they're like incredibly concentrated in all these different plants, animal, or plant species that also have a symbiotic relationship with the trees. And all of that then informs the tea. So pu-erh tea is extremely concentrated in a certain polyphenol called strychnine, which is very active against all sorts of viruses, specifically influenza. And what we found with strychnine is that it inhibits viral replication in the intestines of a number of different viruses, but very interesting, COVID-19. And so, I'm not telling you that pu-erh tea will prevent you from getting COVID, but what I am saying is that there have been these studies that show that it significantly inhibits viral replication of SARS-1 and SARS-2. And there's all this promise in pu-erh tea and the way that it inhibits viral replication, but also boosts our immune system like crazy. So, the daily drinking of pu-erh tea as a general panacea or like health tonic, life-giving anti-aging health tonic is really significant. So there are a couple ways that pu-erh tea specifically benefits us in these healthy ways. One is the increased energy that comes from tea, and that gets into, what I was talking about earlier about caffeine and polyphenols. The second way is a healthy heart. So this has a little bit to do with what I was talking about earlier about health support, but specifically with pu-erh tea, it helps us to produce something called lovastatin, which is a statin. It's a natural occurring statin. And on one hand, it relieves constipation. It reduces LDLs, which is bad cholesterol, low density lipoproteins, but it also increases high density lipoproteins. So all of this lowers heart disease, and heart attacks and heart disease are one of the big killers, right? Especially in North America. Part of that's because our diets, like the standard American diet, is insane and not very healthy. And it's also not to say that just by drinking pu-erh tea, you won't have heart issues, but if you have a healthy diet and you exercise and you work the cardiovascular system, tea through lovastatin really supports and increases our high density lipoprotein concentrations. So very good for heart health, lowers heart disease, cleanses toxins and free radicals for the reasons that I was talking about earlier. But with pu-erh tea specifically, with this varietal, it increases levels of oxygen in the brain and throughout the body, which enhances circulation and blood flow and blood health, heart health. And so it also increases the spleen and the stomach or digestive function because of the microorganisms, which in Chinese medicine really helps the spleen, because this is one of the spleen's functions, to cleanse the blood and flush free radicals out of the body. So again, it's this anti-aging substance that supports the digestive system and helps us assimilate nutrients. So the fourth kind of benefit of pu-erh tea is its cancer preventative functions. Again, cancer is one of the big four killers in North America. Cancer, the percentage of people who develop cancer in the US is kind of crazy these days. And of course, we're trying to understand, is it from radiation? Is it from our diets? Is it from stress? What is the underlying reason why we have such high levels of cancer? I think it's a combination of all of that in the way that we live our lives. But the polyphenols in pu-erh tea inhibit cancer cell proliferation. So it is an anti-cancer substance. That's all I'm going to say about that now, but there's been a lot of amazing research on this. The fifth benefit of pu-erh tea is protecting bone health. So the vitamins, minerals, and polyphenols, they increase bone mass. So for any of you who have elderly people in your lives, parents or aunts or uncles or friends who are older, what is one of the biggest issues that people have as they get older? They fall and their bones have become weak with osteopenia, osteosarcosis, etc. And so they break hips, they break knees, and then those cause other problems. And then they stop moving their bodies as much, which leads to other issues connected with inertia. And oftentimes it's actually bone breaks or bone diseases that lead to a significant decline in health in the elderly population. So the polyphenols increase bone mass, bone density. And the other thing is that the antioxidants in pu-erh tea reduce inflammation, which reduces pain. And what's the other thing with, especially an aging population, is everybody's in pain, and it makes the quality of life go down significantly if your back's always hurting and your knees are always hurting and your joints are always hurting. So I'm not going to get into inflammation, which is also related to stress, because we live in an inflamed culture, and then we try to treat all that inflammation with all these crazy drugs. But reducing inflammation and reducing stress have a profound influence on one's health. And tea is one of those things. So the sixth benefit of pu-erh tea, and there are others, but I'm not going to go into them today, is weight loss because of the gut microorganisms and everything I talked about earlier around that. So maintaining healthy weight. And that maintaining healthy weight has also a host of other benefits because it's not putting so much strain on the vital organs in the body. Okay, are you all with me here? We've gotten through sections 3 out of 4, and I want to talk just for a few minutes about what I think the real benefits of tea are, the real health benefits of tea. But let's have a sip of tea first. All right. So I've talked about this in different ways, but from a Chinese herbalism perspective, tea is called a Shen tonic. And the Shen is the spirit that inhabits the heart. You could say it's your intuition, your conscience, the light of intelligence, your awareness. All of that comes from the heart. It's the ability to discern what is true from untrue in life. And what is true for you is different than what is true for me because we are living different lives. So the Shen, you could say, is a person's spirit. There's also the Wu Shen, which is the 5 spirits, and each of those inhabit different organ systems of the body. They have different purposes. So for example, the Po, which inhabits the lungs, they say when you die, it exits through the colon in the body and goes back into the earth, and it's impermanent. It goes back into the earth and disintegrates. Whereas the Shen is what connects us to heaven. So that's a whole study in and of itself. It's a study of the 5 elements. You can read about each of the spirits and all that if you go into the previous blogs on Living Tea's website. I've written pretty extensively about this. So this has to do not just with the Taoist understanding of our psycho-spiritual makeup, but also the Taoist cosmology and how the earth and heaven interact with each other. But tea is considered a Shen tonic. It fits into this category of herbs, like reishi mushrooms is another herb in there, that really bring the intelligence of the thinking mind and the emotional intelligence of the heart or the spirit together. by calming the mind, by calming the monkey mind, the discursive thinking, and opening the heart so that we can actually access that deeper inner wisdom and inner knowing. What the Greeks all the way through the entire Western philosophical tradition would call one's conscience. It's the still quiet voice in the back of the head that's guiding us in life. And so this person, Claude Lar, who is a Jesuit priest and Taoist, a practitioner of Chinese medicine, he lives in France. He's written a number of books. One of them is called Rooted in Spirit, where he tries to bring together certain Christian ideas with certain Taoist ideas. And he describes the Shen as a wild and precious bird. And he says the bird it's the spark of heaven that's in a human being. It's if you want to go there with me, it's the thing in us, the intelligence or the awareness that carries our memory from one incarnation to the next as we transmigrate through different lifetimes. And the reason that we're not in touch with the wisdom that we accumulate in lifetimes is because we haven't cultivated a real relationship to the Shen where we're in touch with it, where we can hear it. We spend most of our times just in the mind, running, the mind running. And we're not tapped into the deeper intelligence in us, which we can access through meditation and mindfulness practices, and stepping out of the mind. So he describes the Shen as this bird, this wild, precious bird that wants to go back to heaven, where it came from, but only when the heart and the emotions are still and open and there's calm, there's peace in the body. A person isn't frantic all the time or running around, but that they've created emptiness, what's called wu, or wu wei is the practice in Taoism. Only when there is emptiness does the Shen come back and inhabit the heart. When the Shen inhabits the heart, it opens the spiritual eyes. When the spiritual eyes are open, we see the path. So you can use things like the I Ching to help as a guide, to help guide you in life on the right path. The thing is, and I'm very guilty of this, is oftentimes the ego and the intellect try to override the knowing of the heart. So it's about developing a trust and confidence in the knowing of one's intuition or the knowing of the heart. And then taking your own advice, so to speak. So tea as a Shen tonic. Why do people stress out in life? What are they stressing out about? What do you stress out about? When one is really established in their wisdom, they've confronted their fears, and they trust their intuition, they don't stress out anymore. Because when you're really living in the moment, which is how you bring the Shen into the body, when you're really living in the moment and not in the future, anxiety about the future or worry about the past or something, there's no fear. And without fear, one lives with confidence and doesn't stress out about things. So most people I know, and oftentimes myself included, stress is what disallows us from living in the moment and accessing the wisdom of our heart, or of our true selves, you could say. So tea's greatest health benefit is it supports us in accessing this deep wisdom, this deep knowing, and this profound knowledge of who you are in your true nature and what you're here to do, and cultivating that. It's not like you just wake up one day and go, I know my purpose, I know exactly what to do. You have to cultivate that, which means weeding the garden, pulling out all the nonsense, bullshit thoughts and ideas and conditioning, weeding the garden, but also cultivating and nourishing the wisdom in us. When we do those two things, clearing out what's not us and allowing the natural expression of who we are in our essential nature, then we begin to live with wisdom and guidance. that is tea's real health benefit, is that it supports us in that practice. If you create space every day in your life for a tea practice, over time you will find that you have more guidance and clarity about what you're doing in your life. And that is a hell of a lot more important than polyphenols and antioxidants and minerals, I promise you. Those things are wonderful byproducts or side effects, you could say. But the real benefit of tea is getting you in touch with who you really are and living from that place. So, all right, I think that is everything I wanted to share today. If anybody has any questions, then, or anything you just want to share about how tea has supported you in your health, then now's the time.